Here's what she really thinks when you stop chasing her. There comes a point in life when everything starts to change. Not because you finally said the right thing, not because you won an argument, and not because you discovered some magical words that suddenly fixed everything. It changes because you stop. You stop chasing. You stop being the first one to call. You stop forcing conversations that feel completely one-sided. You stop working so hard for attention that should have been given willingly in the first place. And the moment you do, something unexpected begins happening inside her mind. Many people assume that when a man stops chasing a woman, she instantly forgets about him and moves on without giving him another thought. But real life rarely works that way. Human beings are naturally wired to notice absence much more than presence. We become comfortable with the things that are always there. We expect them to remain. We stop paying attention to them because they feel permanent. Yet the moment they disappear, our minds immediately begin searching for what is missing. At first, she may not show any reaction at all. She may continue acting completely normal. She goes to work, spends time with friends, talks to other people, and carries on with her daily routine as if nothing has changed. But somewhere in the back of her mind, a small question begins to form. What happened? The man who always checked on her has gone quiet. The man who always made the effort seems focused on something else. The attention she once expected is no longer arriving the way it used to. And that simple question slowly begins to grow larger. Women tend to be highly aware of patterns. They notice emotional shifts. They pay attention to changes in behavior even when they never mention them out loud. When you stop chasing her, she usually notices it far sooner than most men think. First, she assumes you're busy. Then she wonders whether you're upset. After that, she starts thinking maybe something happened. But eventually, another possibility enters her mind. Maybe you simply decided to stop. And that thought feels different because, for the first time, she is no longer the center of your attention. For the first time, she doesn't know exactly what you're thinking. For the first time, she isn't completely sure where she stands. The certainty she once had begins to fade away. And certainty is something people rarely appreciate until they lose it. She starts remembering things she previously overlooked. Moments she barely paid attention to. Conversations she brushed aside. Efforts she never fully acknowledged. The compliments you gave her. The support you offered. The attention she could always rely on. Suddenly, those things seem more valuable because they are no longer being given so freely. That is simply human nature. We often fail to recognize the value of something while it remains constantly available. We usually recognize it after it's gone. Then another thought begins creeping into her mind. Is he talking to someone else? Now it's important to understand that this isn't always jealousy. Often it's curiosity. When someone who once invested their energy into you suddenly directs that energy elsewhere, it naturally raises questions. She begins wondering where your attention has gone. She notices that you're no longer reacting to everything she posts. You're no longer looking for her approval. You're no longer trying to impress her at every opportunity. And without realizing it, she starts paying closer attention to you than she did before. Why? Because mystery has returned. The moment you stop chasing, your life becomes less predictable. And unpredictability creates curiosity. Curiosity creates attention. Attention creates emotional investment. She starts noticing things she never noticed before. She begins paying attention to details she once ignored. She wonders what you're doing when you're not thinking about her, because she can no longer assume that your entire world revolves around her. Slowly, another realization may start forming. Maybe I underestimated him. This is especially true if she became accustomed to your constant effort. When someone always gives, people often assume they always will. When someone always stays, people assume they'll never leave. When someone constantly chases, people begin believing they have no other options. But the moment you stop chasing, you reveal something powerful. You reveal self-respect. You reveal standards. You reveal that you're capable of walking away from situations that don't offer the same energy in return. And that changes how people see you. Few things earn respect faster than someone who genuinely understands their own value. Not arrogance, not ego, not manipulation. Just real self-respect. The kind that quietly says, I care about you, but I won't lose myself trying to convince you to care about me. That mindset carries enormous power because it communicates strength without needing to say a word. As time passes, another realization may begin growing inside her. She starts asking herself whether she gave enough in return. While you were chasing, all the attention was focused on your effort. Now the spotlight shifts. Now she begins examining her own actions. Did she appreciate you? Did she recognize your effort? Did she match the energy you gave her? Did she take your presence for granted? These questions are often uncomfortable because they require honest self-reflection. And honest reflection usually happens only after some distance has been created. Distance has a unique way of revealing truths that constant closeness often hides. When someone is always available, we rarely stop to measure their importance. We simply expect them to be there. But once they step back, we are forced to evaluate what they actually meant to us. That's when emotions often become much clearer. Some women eventually realize they genuinely miss you. Not just the attention, not just the validation, not just the convenience. They miss your conversations, your presence, your energy, your sense of humor, your support, and the comfort of knowing someone truly cared. Because despite what many people believe, attention and connection are not the same thing. Attention can come from almost anyone. Genuine connection is much rarer. And when a real connection disappears, it leaves behind a space that is difficult to replace. Then another thought may appear. What if I lost him? There is a major difference between not having someone and losing someone. Those are two very different experiences. When she believed you would always be there, there was no urgency, no pressure, no fear of losing anything. But once that certainty disappears, the value often becomes impossible to ignore. The possibility of loss forces people to recognize what they actually had. Sometimes that realization arrives much later than expected. She may suddenly remember conversations from months ago. She may think about your kindness. She may replay moments she barely noticed at the time. She may wonder why your absence affects her more deeply than she expected. Because emotions often become loudest when everything becomes quiet. When you stop chasing, you create space. And inside that space, thoughts begin to grow. Questions begin to grow. Feelings begin to grow. Sometimes she reaches out, sometimes she doesn't. But regardless of what she chooses to do, one thing remains true. She notices, she thinks, she reflects. And that is why endlessly chasing someone rarely creates value. Real value is created when people have the freedom to recognize it for themselves. You should never stop chasing someone as a manipulation tactic. You should never pull away simply to play games. That's not confidence. That's insecurity pretending to be strategy. The real reason to stop chasing is much simpler. You finally understand that your worth is not determined by another person's response. You realize that healthy love should never require endless pursuit. You understand that mutual effort is the foundation of every meaningful relationship. And when you reach that understanding, something changes within you. You stop seeking constant validation. You stop forcing outcomes. You stop trying to control how someone feels about you. Instead, you focus on your purpose, your growth, your goals, and your peace of mind. Ironically, that is often when people begin seeing your value more clearly, because confidence is attractive, self-respect is attractive, and emotional maturity is attractive. Few things are more powerful than someone who can walk away from what isn't right for them while continuing to move forward with dignity. The moment you stop chasing isn't necessarily the moment you lose your power. In many cases, it's the moment you finally discover it. And perhaps the most interesting part of all is that once you stop chasing, you stop viewing the situation through desperation. For the first time, you begin seeing it through clarity. For a long time, your emotions may have convinced you that every slow reply simply meant she was busy. Every canceled plan seemed reasonable. Every lack of effort felt temporary. When you're deeply invested in someone, it's easy to overlook what's actually happening right in front of you. But distance changes everything. Distance gives you perspective. It allows you to see how much effort was truly being returned. It helps you recognize whether the connection was balanced or whether you were carrying most of the weight by yourself. And while you're gaining that clarity, something else is taking place inside her mind. She's starting to compare. She's comparing the version of her life that included your attention to the version that doesn't. She's comparing the comfort of knowing you cared with the uncertainty of no longer knowing what you're thinking. She's comparing the energy you once brought into her world with the silence that has now taken its place. Many women don't fully realize how much emotional value a man contributed until that contribution disappears. Not because they're selfish, not because they're bad people, but because familiarity has a way of turning extraordinary things into ordinary ones. A thoughtful message every morning eventually feels normal. Someone checking on you regularly becomes expected. Someone always being available begins to feel automatic. Yet when those things suddenly stop, the difference becomes impossible to miss. Mornings feel different. Conversations feel different. The emotional atmosphere feels different. And slowly, she starts realizing that your presence affected her far more than she originally admitted. Another thought often begins to surface. Why isn't he chasing me anymore? That question can become surprisingly powerful. When someone grows accustomed to receiving attention, the absence of that attention naturally creates a void. The human mind dislikes empty spaces. It wants explanations. It wants certainty. It wants answers. And when those answers don't exist, imagination takes over. Maybe he met someone else. Maybe he lost interest. Maybe he finally recognized his own value. Maybe he's happier without me. Maybe he doesn't think about me anymore. Notice how the emotional dynamic shifts. For a long time, you may have spent your energy wondering what she thought about you. Now she may find herself wondering what you think about her. The focus changes, the energy changes, the pressure changes. That's why silence can sometimes communicate more than endless conversations ever could. Not because silence is a weapon, but because silence removes assumptions. When you're always available, people assume you'll remain available forever. When you're no longer there in the same way, those assumptions disappear. Reality takes their place. She may begin looking for signs. She may pay closer attention to your social media activity. She may start noticing details she once ignored. She may wonder whether you're moving forward. She may wonder whether you're happier. She may wonder whether someone else is now receiving the attention she once took for granted. Every one of those thoughts creates emotional movement. One of the biggest misconceptions people have is believing that women only think about men they are deeply in love with. That's simply not true. People think about those who left an impact on them. People think about those who challenged them. People think about those who created meaningful emotional experiences. If you brought positivity into her life, she remembers. If you made her feel understood, she remembers. If you consistently showed genuine care, she remembers. Even if she never says it. Even if her pride prevents her from admitting it. Even if she acts completely unaffected. Memories don't disappear simply because someone pretends they do. In fact, once your presence is removed, those memories often become even louder. The mind has a strange tendency to replay what it can no longer access. Moments that once seemed insignificant suddenly gain meaning. A simple conversation becomes memorable. A shared laugh becomes valuable. A supportive moment becomes unforgettable. She starts revisiting experiences she barely acknowledged while they were happening, because now there is space to truly feel them. Sometimes frustration appears, not directed at you, but at herself. Reflection has a way of revealing missed opportunities. It reveals things that deserved more appreciation. It reveals effort that wasn't fully recognized. And those realizations can be difficult to face. Nobody enjoys realizing they took something valuable for granted. Nobody likes recognizing that they could have done more. Yet growth often begins with uncomfortable truths. The more she reflects, the more she may start seeing you differently. Not as the man who constantly pursued her, not as the person who was always available, but as someone who genuinely cared. Someone who invested emotionally. Someone who showed up consistently. Someone who offered something real. That perspective is completely different. When you're chasing, people often focus only on the chase. When you stop, they begin focusing on the person behind it. They separate your value from your effort. They begin recognizing qualities they overlooked before: your patience, your loyalty, your consistency, your emotional strength, your ability to care deeply. These qualities become far more visible once they are no longer being freely given. At some point, she may also begin questioning her own feelings. This happens more often than most people realize. When you're always there, she never has to experience life without you. There is no contrast, no absence, no emotional test. But once you're gone, she encounters something entirely different. She experiences your absence. And absence has a remarkable way of exposing emotions that were previously hidden. Sometimes she discovers she misses you more than she expected. Sometimes she realizes she cared more than she thought. Sometimes she recognizes that what seemed casual actually mattered. Feelings become easier to identify when they are no longer constantly being fulfilled. When something is available every day, people stop measuring its importance. When it's gone, they suddenly understand its value. This applies to relationships. It applies to friendships. It applies to life itself. People often understand significance through absence. That's why your decision to stop chasing can become a turning point. Not only for her, but for you as well. Because while she is reflecting, you are evolving. You're learning how to redirect your energy back toward yourself. You're learning how to invest in your goals, your future, and your personal growth. You're learning how to build a life that doesn't depend on someone else's validation. And that transformation is powerful. People can sense when someone is no longer operating from need. They can sense when someone has developed inner stability. There is a quiet confidence that comes from knowing your worth. A confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. A confidence that doesn't demand attention. A confidence that simply exists. Ironically, that kind of confidence often earns more respect than endless pursuit ever could. You become harder to ignore because you're no longer trying to be noticed. You become more intriguing because you're no longer seeking approval. You become more valuable because you've stopped giving away your value without limits. Meanwhile, her mind continues working. Questions continue forming. Thoughts continue growing. She may remember a conversation where you encouraged her when nobody else did. She may remember moments when you listened without judgment. She may remember times when your support helped her through difficult days. The emotional impact of those memories can be surprisingly powerful because genuine care is rare. Attention is common. Attraction is common. Genuine care is not. Genuine care leaves a lasting impression. And impressions don't disappear overnight, even if she never reaches out. Even if she never admits what she's feeling, the memories remain, the awareness remains, the impact remains. She becomes conscious of your absence in ways she never expected. And sometimes that's when regret quietly begins to appear. Regret isn't always dramatic. It isn't always overwhelming sadness. Sometimes regret is simply wondering what might have happened if different choices had been made. Sometimes regret is realizing someone's value after they've stopped trying to prove it. Sometimes regret is understanding a person's importance only after they've walked away. These thoughts often arrive during quiet moments. Late at night, during a long drive, during an ordinary day when something unexpectedly reminds her of you. A song, a place, a memory, a conversation. Suddenly, you're back in her thoughts, not because you're chasing her, not because you're demanding attention, but because your absence created room for reflection. And reflection creates emotional honesty. The truth is that many women expect certain men to chase forever, not because they intentionally want to take advantage of them, but because consistency creates expectations. When someone has always been there, it's easy to believe they'll always remain there. The moment that expectation is broken, everything feels different. The emotional landscape changes. That's when she begins seeing what she once overlooked. She starts seeing the strength it took for you to walk away. She starts seeing the discipline it took to stop reaching out. She starts recognizing the self-respect behind your silence. Because walking away from someone you care about is never easy. Anyone can remain where they aren't valued. Anyone can continue begging for attention. Anyone can keep chasing approval. But it takes strength to choose dignity over desperation. It takes strength to accept uncertainty. It takes strength to let go of what isn't being returned. And whether she admits it or not, she notices that strength. She notices that you're no longer controlled by the situation. She notices that your happiness doesn't depend entirely on her response. She notices that you're capable of moving forward. And that realization often changes everything she thought she knew about you. The man she assumed would always stay suddenly proves he can leave. The man she assumed would always chase suddenly proves he can stop. The man she assumed would always wait suddenly proves he values his own time. Those realizations force an entirely new perspective to emerge. A perspective where you're no longer viewed through the lens of availability. A perspective where you're seen through the lens of value. A perspective where your absence speaks louder than your presence ever did. And while she continues trying to understand why your silence affects her so deeply, she may begin realizing something she never expected. The attention she once considered ordinary may have actually been one of the most meaningful things she ever received. Now that it's gone, every memory, every conversation, and every moment of connection begins carrying a weight she never felt when it was right in front of her. She revisits the past again and again, searching for answers, searching for clarity, wondering whether the person she believed would always be there has already started writing a completely new chapter without her. That thought can feel unsettling. Not because she wants control over your life, but because certainty has vanished. Human beings are comfortable with certainty. We like knowing where people stand. We like knowing who will answer when we call. We like knowing who will continue showing up. When you stop chasing, that certainty disappears. For the first time, she cannot predict you. For the first time, she doesn't know if you're thinking about her. For the first time, she doesn't know whether you've completely moved on. And uncertainty has a powerful way of capturing attention. She may find herself checking her phone more often than usual. Not because she expects a message, but because part of her is curious. Part of her wonders if you'll reach out. Part of her wonders if this silence is temporary. Part of her wonders whether this is truly the end. The interesting thing about curiosity is that it grows when it isn't satisfied. Every day without answers gives the mind more room to create questions. And those questions often lead back to you. She begins analyzing old conversations, replaying moments in her mind, examining things she once dismissed. Maybe she remembers the time you encouraged her when she doubted herself. Maybe she remembers how you noticed small details that others ignored. Maybe she remembers how consistently you showed up. Those things once felt ordinary. Now they feel significant because significance often reveals itself through absence. The mind naturally compares the past to the present. And if your presence added something meaningful to her life, that difference becomes impossible to ignore. Another thought many women experience, though they rarely say it aloud, is this: did I make a mistake? Sometimes that question appears after seeing your growth. Sometimes after hearing about your success. Sometimes after realizing nobody else treated her quite the same way. People often assume replacements are easy to find. Attention is easy to find. Validation is easy to find. Real connection is not. Real loyalty is not. Real consistency is not. Those qualities are far rarer than people realize. And when access to them disappears, people begin recognizing their true value. As time passes, your absence may take on a different meaning. At first, she saw it as silence. Then she saw it as distance. Eventually, she may begin seeing it as a decision made by someone who finally chose himself. And whether she agrees with that decision or not, she often respects it more than she expected. There is something admirable about a person who refuses to beg for a place in someone's life. There is something admirable about someone who knows when to stop forcing what isn't flowing naturally. There is something admirable about someone who values peace over emotional chaos. While she's processing all of these thoughts, another realization often begins to emerge. You weren't simply chasing her. You were investing in her. And there is a difference. Chasing is often seen as pursuit. Investment is deeper, it's time, it's energy, it's attention, it's care. And when that investment disappears, people feel the difference. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually. Like realizing a familiar song is no longer playing. Like noticing a light that was always on has suddenly gone dark. Like discovering that something you barely noticed was contributing far more than you understood. This realization can completely change how she views your past actions. Effort becomes clearer, intention becomes clearer, value becomes clearer, and clarity changes perception. That's why people so often fail to appreciate what they have until after it's gone. Perspective usually arrives late, sometimes very late, sometimes months later, sometimes years later, sometimes after opportunities have already disappeared. She may begin wondering what your life looks like now, what fills your thoughts, who occupies your time, whether you're happier, whether you've found peace, whether someone else has recognized the qualities she overlooked. These questions are natural because when someone leaves an emotional imprint on your life, curiosity remains, even when feelings fade, even when circumstances change, even when paths separate, the impact remains. And impact creates memories. The strongest memories are rarely connected to perfection. They're connected to emotion. People remember how they felt. They remember who made them feel understood. They remember who made them feel important. They remember who genuinely cared. Those memories don't disappear simply because communication stops. In fact, silence often makes them louder. Without new interactions distracting the mind, old experiences become more vivid. She begins remembering your laugh, your voice, your energy, your presence, and all the little things she never paid much attention to before. Because little things often become the biggest things once they're gone. As these memories continue resurfacing, she may finally recognize something she never fully understood before. Your value was never based on your pursuit. Your value was based on who you are, your kindness, your patience, your effort, your authenticity, your loyalty, your strength, your character. Those qualities existed before you chased her, and they continue to exist after you stop. The difference is that now they are no longer hidden behind constant effort. Now they stand on their own. And that realization can completely transform the way someone sees you. Sometimes she begins missing your energy. Not because she needs attention, but because every person brings a unique presence into the lives of others. Some bring peace. Some bring excitement. Some bring comfort. Some bring inspiration. When that energy leaves, life feels different. The change may be subtle, but it exists. Eventually, she notices it. She notices that certain conversations don't feel the same. She notices that certain moments feel emptier. She notices that something is missing, even if she can't fully explain what it is. That's the power of genuine connection. Its absence creates echoes. Echoes that linger longer than expected. Echoes that appear during random moments. Echoes that remind people of what once existed. And while all of this may be happening in her mind, something equally important is happening in yours. You're becoming stronger. Not because you're trying to prove a point, not because you're trying to make her miss you, but because you're finally redirecting your energy. Energy that was once spent chasing.